Hello everyone, I hope you're doing really well and thank you so much for joining me in this video. It's a fantastic day to be out and I'm quite excited today because this is my very first shoot doing some wildlife with the Fuji X-H2S camera which I've got here. If you've been following my channel for some time, you will often have heard me mention when I've been doing wildlife photography or talking about it, or talking about cameras in general, that I've been very keen to get this camera for my wildlife photography. And I think now it's been out for probably quite a bit of time, over a year, maybe a few months, and I've eventually got one, so that's fantastic. So today I'm out to give it a good test, try it out and see how I get on. So come on, let's join me and see what I can find. So at this stage I've basically just got the camera, there's a fully charged battery in it, there's some empty memory cards, and I spent a little bit of time at home trying to configure the camera the way I think that I would want it. So there's going to be some error today, some user error, simply because I'm not used to the camera. But yeah, over time I'll be using it a lot. I'll get more accustomed to how it works, the controls, how it feels in my hands, and I'll adjust my settings as need be in terms of what each of the buttons and dials do. You can really customize the camera a lot. But anyway, there are a lot of garnets here just to my left, and I think this is going to make a nice place to try out some of my first shots with this camera. So recently, and in the last couple of years, I've been using a Fuji X-T3 for doing my wildlife photography, also at times a Fuji X-T4. And I'm very familiar with those cameras. I really love them. They're fantastic. They produce great images, really nice image quality. And I really do like the dials on top. They're fantastic for my landscape photography, and they're very customizable as well, so you can really control your shutter speed and so on with the rear dials if you actually want to do that rather than with the dials on top. But the first impressions I'm getting before I actually even take any images, I've just been having a look through the viewfinder, is that the viewfinder is incredibly good. I really like that. And it's also just about the design and feel and size of the camera. So this camera is going to be slightly bigger than my X-T3, slightly heavier as well, and it doesn't have the dials on top that many X-series users are very familiar with and love. But it's completely subjective, but my first impressions are that for pure wildlife photography, I do think this is a better design of camera. I think the size just feels a better partnership with this large lens. I'm using the XF 150 to 600mm lens, so it's slightly bigger, slightly heavier camera, not noticeably heavier, very minor if it is, but I just think it's a better partnership for this size of lens. I do think as well, once I get familiar with it, it's going to be a very good button and dial layout for wildlife photography. I like having the dial on top so I can glance at some of my settings just as I'm walking along. And I also think the C1 to C7 custom modes, your custom settings, you can save your configuration to each of those. I think that's going to be very useful for me for just switching between different settings very quickly using one of these custom modes. So that's the sort of first impressions I'm getting here as I just start to look through the viewfinder, tracking some flying birds, and sort of what I've been getting the impression of back at home when I've been setting it up as well. So when this camera was announced over a year ago now, what excited me about it for wildlife photography was not a jump in megapixels or a jump in image quality. For my wildlife photography, I was happy with the megapixels and the image quality from my X-T3. And in terms of image quality, this camera will produce nigh on identical results to my X-T3. But what excited me and why I've been keen to get my hands on one of these cameras is simply the improved autofocus. So as a wildlife photographer, I'm hopefully going to be able to focus on my subjects quicker with more accuracy. If they're moving, it's going to track them better. And of course it's got subject detection as well, so it can detect a number of things, but for me what is of interest to me for my wildlife is animal detect and bird detect. So I've been having a little experiment with that just now and it seems to be working very well. So it can draw a box around the bird when it detects the bird, and it can also draw a very small box round the bird's eye when it detects the eye and locks onto that. It's been working very well. Of course there are different lighting conditions, there are more complex backgrounds, there's different subjects that I'll be photographing, so it's probably going to work better in certain situations than others. But so far today it's been working fantastically well, and it really is something that I think will be an asset to my wildlife photography. Having used Fujifilm cameras for a number of years, some camera features were familiar, yet my XH2S introduced changes and advancements not found on any of my older cameras. As I walked along in changing conditions, I photographed a number of stationary and also in-flight birds, while trying to get more familiar with the new camera in my hands. So I'm just photographing either one or two gannets here just ahead of me over the cliff. One is flying off and coming back. They're not really aware that I'm here. They're more often looking out at sea or pruning or looking in the other direction. So yeah, it's quite nice being able to photograph these. And when the garnets are quite close, I've been quite impressed with the eye detection. It's finding the eye really quickly and maintaining focus on it. So that is nice, and it helps you regarding framing up your compositions instead of moving a focus point around. So that's been quite useful for me, and I've been impressed. Looks very good through the viewfinder when you're taking the images. I will of course review them for sharpness and accurate focus when I look at them on my computer. One other thing that I was very keen to try on this camera and get the camera for is the silent shutter, the electronic shutter. So I'm hoping to be able to use that on this camera all the time, or the majority of the time. This is my first time out. I'm going to need to do a lot of testing, but if any of you use this camera, the XH2S, and you're photographing very fast moving subjects, or parts of subjects are moving very quickly, have you noticed any issues in your images, or are you quite happy to use the electronic shutter all the time? I will do some testing when I get round to it, but I'd like to hear from anyone else that's been doing that. But a little bit of activity here, so I'm going to keep photographing. As you'll no doubt be able to see in the video, the conditions have changed a bit now. It's got much duller, much more overcast, and there's an awful lot of cloud lingering about above. So I think for today, I'm going to call it in terms of my photography. And I've really enjoyed my first trip out with the Fuji XH2S. I think it is a fantastic camera based upon my first impressions. I definitely need to come out and practice more. There's a lot of customization you can do in the camera in terms of its autofocus. There's many settings in the menus, and you can really configure the buttons and dials the way you want them. So I think I've done a not bad job getting it set up the way I want it so far, but I'm definitely going to practice some more and make some tweaks just to refine my setup. Then I think it's going to be absolutely fantastic for my wildlife photography. It's been quite challenging today trying out a new camera, and then as anyone who films these YouTube videos will know, it's a lot of work filming video, so there is a tendency for the photography to get left behind. So I'm not sure if I'll have captured fantastic images today, because I do get distracted with the camera, trying a new camera, recording video. So I'm not going to be too hard on myself regarding my images, but I do hope I've captured some pretty good ones at least. As always, I hope you've enjoyed watching. I really do appreciate it. If you've got one of these cameras, let me know how you find it in the comments below. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts, and hopefully I will see you in my next video.